Tonight, we are leaving behind the towering pyramids, glittering treasures, and mighty pharaohs of ancient Egypt. Instead, we are stepping into a much quieter world, the world of ordinary women whose stories were rarely carved into stone, yet shaped everyday life along the banks of the Nile. As you settle in and relax, imagine the first light of dawn touching the calm river. Fishing boats drift across the water, birds call from the reeds, and the warm smell of fresh bread rises from clay ovens. A peaceful village slowly awakens, and inside a simple mud brick home, a young girl begins another ordinary day. Over the next few hours, we will gently follow her through every stage of life. We will discover how ancient Egyptian women grew up, cared for their health, managed their monthly cycles, created beautiful perfumes and cosmetics, fell in love, married, raised children, and found comfort in family, faith, and tradition. History often remembers kings, but tonight belongs to the women who quietly kept Egypt alive. So let the modern world fade away, relax beneath the timeless Egyptian sky, and together let us uncover the hidden lives of ancient Egyptian women beside the ever-flowing Nile. The Nile has already been awake for hours. Long before the village begins to stir, the great river is quietly flowing beneath the pale colors of dawn. A light mist rests upon the water, softening the distant palm trees until they seem almost like a dream. Small fishing boats glide across the calm surface without a sound, their reflections stretching gently beneath them. White herons stand patiently among the reeds, waiting for breakfast with far more patience than most people could ever manage. The first rays of sunlight slowly spread across the fields, warming the rich black soil left behind by the Nile's yearly floods. Mud brick homes begin to glow with a golden light, and one by one, the peaceful sounds of the village slowly awaken. A rooster crows. A donkey loudly announces that it has survived another night. Somewhere nearby, a goat decides that someone else's vegetable garden looks far more interesting than its own. Some things, it seems, never change. Tonight, we are not following a famous queen. We are not standing inside a magnificent temple or watching workers build giant pyramids that would one day amaze the world. Instead, we are stepping through the doorway of a small mud brick house, where history becomes much quieter. Inside lives an ordinary Egyptian family. Their names have long been forgotten. No statues were carved in their honor. No royal scribes recorded the details of their lives. Yet families like theirs were the heart of ancient Egypt. They planted the crops, baked the bread, raised the children, and quietly kept one of history's greatest civilizations alive. Inside the house, a young girl slowly opens her eyes. She is perhaps 6 or 7 years old. She stretches beneath a light linen blanket while the cool morning air still lingers inside the thick mud brick walls. Through a small window, she can hear birds singing outside and the gentle voices of neighbors already beginning their day. There are no clocks, no alarm bells, no buzzing phones demanding attention before breakfast. Instead, the rising sun tells everyone when it is time to wake. Life follows the rhythm of nature. The little girl rubs the sleep from her eyes before hurrying toward her mother, who is already busy preparing the morning meal. Breakfast is simple. Fresh bread baked the evening before, perhaps a few sweet dates, maybe some figs if the season has been generous, and a cup of weak barley beer, which was one of the safest drinks available in ancient Egypt. It contained very little alcohol and was often cleaner than water that had been sitting in clay jars beneath the hot sun. As the family quietly eats together, there is no rush. No one is staring at a glowing screen. No one is checking messages. The only interruption might be a curious cat politely pretending it deserves part of everyone's breakfast. Considering how useful cats were at keeping mice away from precious grain, most families were happy to have them around. Our young girl certainly enjoys their company. Once breakfast is finished, the day's lessons begin. Not inside a classroom, but all around her. For most children in ancient Egypt, learning did not happen while sitting behind wooden desks. Instead, every corner of the village became a place of education. The kitchen taught cooking, the fields taught farming, the river taught fishing, the weaving room taught patience. Even simple conversations between grandparents carried lessons that could not be found in any scroll. Today, the girl's mother is grinding grain. She kneels beside a heavy stone quern, slowly crushing wheat into fine flour with steady, practiced movements. It is demanding work, repeated almost every single day. The little girl watches closely. Soon she asks if she can help. Her mother smiles and gently moves aside. The child eagerly pushes the heavy grinding stone with all her strength. It barely moves. She tries again. This time it rolls a little farther. A small cloud of flour rises into the air and lands neatly across her nose. Her mother laughs softly. The little girl laughs too. Learning often begins with little mistakes. Nearby, her grandmother sits beneath the shade of the courtyard, patiently spinning flax fibers into thread. Her hands move with such confidence that they hardly seem to think anymore. Later, she begins weaving that thread into fine linen on a simple wooden loom. The little girl watches every movement with quiet fascination. No one tells her to memorize the pattern. She simply watches. Tomorrow she will try a little herself. Next year she will become better. One day she will hardly remember ever learning. This is how knowledge travels through generations. Quietly, patiently, from hands to hands rather than from books to desks. As the morning grows warmer, mother and daughter step outside together. The village is now alive with activity. Women carry smooth clay jars toward the Nile. Farmers lead oxen into the fields. Potters shape spinning clay into elegant jars. Carpenters smooth rough wood into stools, chests, and simple furniture. The air smells of fresh bread, damp earth, and smoke rising gently from cooking fires. Children run laughing between the narrow streets, their bare feet leaving tiny footprints in the soft dust. Our little girl carries a small woven basket. It is much too small to hold anything important. Still, she carries it proudly beside her mother as though she is helping feed the entire village. Inside rests a handful of onions, a few herbs, and somehow, one very determined beetle that seems perfectly happy with its unexpected journey. Every important helper has to begin somewhere. The path toward the river is full of familiar faces. Everyone greets one another warmly. In villages like these, neighbors are almost like family. People know whose goats escape most often, whose bread smells the best, and whose children somehow manage to return home covered in mud every single afternoon. Some village mysteries never seem to solve themselves. At the riverbank, women kneel to fill their clay jars with fresh water. They chat softly as they work, exchanging news about the coming harvest, family celebrations, and whose chickens have decided to wander into someone else's yard this week. The little girl listens carefully. Adults always seem to know interesting things. Sometimes they even know things before they happen. She wonders how they do it. Perhaps growing up comes with secret powers. Nearby, boys skip smooth stones across the Nile, while younger children splash near the shallow edge under the watchful eyes of older sisters. The little girl notices dragonflies dancing above the reeds. She spots a turtle resting on a sun-warmed rock. A fisherman patiently untangles his nets while another carefully repairs a wooden oar. To her, everything feels interesting. Everything feels worth watching. On the walk home, her mother pauses beside a small patch of herbs growing near the house. She points to one plant. This one helps with a sore stomach. She points to another. This one smells sweet when crushed. The little girl bends down to smell the leaves. The scent is fresh and earthy. She smiles. Without realizing it, she is already learning the first lessons that mothers and grandmothers have passed from one generation to the next for centuries. Not every lesson comes from words. Some come from simply being together. By midday, the Egyptian sun grows hot. Most work slows for a little while. Inside the cool house, the family shares another simple meal. Bread, lentils, onions, perhaps dried fish from the Nile. Fresh fruit if the season has been kind. There are no fancy dishes, no silver plates, yet nobody leaves the table hungry. Meals are more than food. They are moments to gather, to laugh, to tell stories. The girl's grandfather enjoys telling stories more than anyone else. Today he speaks of a flood that happened many years ago. He describes how the Nile rose higher than anyone expected, leaving behind soil so rich that the next harvest became one of the best the village had ever seen. The little girl listens with wide eyes. Halfway through the story she interrupts. Did the fish come into the house too? Everyone laughs. Grandfather smiles. Only one, he says, and he was a very rude guest. Curious children have always asked unexpected questions. The afternoon passes peacefully. The girl plays with friends beneath the shade of date palms. They race through the dusty paths. They build tiny houses from mud. They pretend to cook imaginary meals using leaves and pebbles. One child proudly declares himself captain of a reed boat that exists only in everyone's imagination. No one argues. Imaginary boats are surprisingly easy to share. As the shadows grow longer, families slowly return from the fields. Oxen walk home at an unhurried pace. Fishing boats glide back toward the shore. Smoke rises once more from cooking fires. The village becomes peaceful again. After supper, neighbors sit outside their homes enjoying the cooler evening air. Children chase one another until mothers gently call them home. Oil lamps are lit inside the houses. Their warm glow dances softly across the mud brick walls. Our young girl curls beside her grandmother, who gently brushes her hair while humming a quiet song that her own mother once sang long ago. Outside, the stars slowly appear above the desert sky. The Nile reflects the moonlight like polished silver. The little girl closes her eyes. She does not know it yet, but each new season will change her little by little. Soon she will grow taller. Her responsibilities will become greater. The games of childhood will slowly give way to new questions about herself and the world around her. The little girl who spent her mornings chasing ducks beside the Nile is beginning a journey every woman before her has taken. The quiet path from childhood to young womanhood. And along that path, she will soon discover that growing up in ancient Egypt brought not only new responsibilities, but also new traditions, new mysteries, and the first signs that her life was about to change in ways she had never imagined. The seasons pass quietly beside the Nile. The little girl who once spent her afternoons chasing dragonflies and laughing with her friends is no longer quite so little. Almost without anyone noticing, she has grown taller. Her footsteps are steadier now. Her hands have become more confident. The simple tasks that once seemed difficult now feel almost effortless. Time moves gently in ancient Egypt. Like the river itself, it never seems to hurry. Yet somehow everything changes. One morning, as the first sunlight reaches the village, our young girl joins her mother at the riverbank. Together they carry smooth clay jars, filling them with cool water while chatting with neighbors. She notices something different. The older girls no longer treat her like a child. They invite her into their conversations. They smile knowingly when she asks questions. Sometimes they whisper to one another before quietly laughing. She cannot quite understand why, but she senses that she is standing on the edge of something new. Growing up did not arrive with a loud announcement. There was no grand ceremony, no birthday party with candles, no official moment when someone declared, "You are an adult now." Instead, childhood slowly faded, almost like the last stars disappearing as the sun rises. For girls in ancient Egypt, one of the clearest signs of this new stage of life was the arrival of their first monthly bleeding. Today we call it a period. To ancient Egyptians, it was simply one of the many natural changes that marked the journey into womanhood. Unlike many societies throughout history, there is little evidence that Egyptians viewed menstruation as something shameful or unclean. It was understood as a normal part of life, closely connected with fertility, health, and the possibility of one day becoming a mother. Of course, that did not mean it was always easy. Imagine being a young girl who suddenly notices something she has never experienced before. It would likely feel confusing, perhaps even a little frightening. Fortunately, she was not alone. Long before the first signs appeared, mothers and grandmothers had quietly prepared their daughters for the changes that would eventually come. These conversations probably happened while baking bread together, while weaving linen, while collecting herbs beside the Nile, not as formal lessons, simply as gentle advice passed from one generation to the next. One day, a mother might say softly, "Your body will begin to change, and when it does, do not be afraid." Every woman in our family has walked this path. Those simple words likely brought great comfort, because growing up can feel a little mysterious in every century. As the months passed, our young girl noticed other changes too. Her childhood games slowly became less important. She still laughed with her friends. She still enjoyed racing through the village after the day's work was finished. But now she also found herself spending more time helping inside the home. Her mother trusted her with greater responsibilities: grinding grain, preparing vegetables, watching younger brothers and sisters, weaving longer pieces of linen, carrying heavier water jars. At first, some of those jars probably felt much heavier than they looked. Water has always had a remarkable talent for weighing more than expected. Still, every day made her stronger. Family life in ancient Egypt depended upon everyone helping together. There was little room for idleness, but work was rarely lonely. Women prepared meals side by side. Neighbors gathered while grinding grain. Children played nearby as older girls learned new skills. Daily life became both classroom and community. The young girl listened carefully. Older women spoke about everything: recipes, harvests, babies, neighbors, the weather, and occasionally they shared quiet advice that younger ears were only just beginning to understand. Much of a girl's education happened through listening rather than asking. She observed how older women cared for their families, how they welcomed guests, how they comforted frightened children, how they stayed calm when unexpected problems appeared. Wisdom often revealed itself through ordinary moments. As her body matured, People around her slowly adjusted the way they treated her. Older relatives expected more responsibility. Younger children looked up to her. Her opinions began to matter. She was no longer simply one of the little ones running barefoot through dusty streets. She was becoming a young woman. With that new role came quiet expectations. One day she would build a home of her own. One day she might marry. One day she might become a mother. There was no pressure to rush toward those milestones immediately, but everyone understood that childhood was gently coming to an end. Religion also shaped the way Egyptians understood womanhood. The gods and goddesses reflected many parts of daily life, and several powerful female deities offered examples of strength, love, protection, and motherhood. Perhaps no goddess was loved more warmly than Hathor. She was associated with joy, music, beauty, love, and motherhood. Her temples welcomed music, dancing, and celebration. Many women prayed to Hathor throughout different stages of life, asking for happiness, healthy children, and peaceful families. Another beloved protector was Taaret. Unlike the graceful images we often imagine today, Taaret looked rather unusual. She had the body of a pregnant hippopotamus, the legs of a lion, the back of a crocodile, and the tail of another great beast. She was not meant to look beautiful. She was meant to frighten away danger. Ancient families placed small statues of Taaret inside their homes, believing she guarded mothers and children from harm. She may have looked intimidating, but to Egyptian families, she represented comfort. Sometimes the strongest protectors wear the most unexpected faces. Growing older also meant paying a little more attention to personal appearance. Young women washed regularly whenever water was available. They kept their linen clothing as clean as possible. Hair was brushed carefully. Simple oils helped protect skin from the dry Egyptian sun. Beauty was not simply about looking attractive. Cleanliness was connected with health, comfort, and respect for both oneself and others. Even ordinary families took pride in presenting themselves well. As evening arrived, our young woman sat beside her grandmother beneath a sky filled with stars. The older woman quietly braided her granddaughter's dark hair while speaking about the years ahead. "There is no need to hurry," she might have said. "Every season comes when it is ready." It was simple advice, but perhaps it was also wise. The Nile never rushed toward the sea. Flowers opened when their time arrived. Children became adults little by little. Life itself seemed to understand the value of patience. The young woman smiled softly. She still had much to learn. She could not yet imagine all the experiences waiting for her. Love, marriage, children, joy, loss, and countless ordinary days that would quietly shape a lifetime. But before any of those adventures could begin, there was another question every young Egyptian woman would eventually face. Practical question, a very personal one. How did women living more than 3,000 years ago manage their monthly cycles without the comforts of the modern world? Surprisingly, the answer reveals just how resourceful, practical, and knowledgeable the women of ancient Egypt truly were. That is where our peaceful journey continues next. The first monthly cycle has arrived. The surprise has slowly faded. What once felt unfamiliar is beginning to become another quiet part of life, much like the changing seasons or the yearly flood of the Nile. Our young Egyptian woman is growing more comfortable with her body, helped by the gentle guidance of her mother, grandmother, and the other experienced women around her. There are no pharmacies, no disposable products neatly arranged on shop shelves, no instruction book waiting beside the bed. Instead, there is experience, knowledge shared through countless generations. The women of ancient Egypt had been caring for one another long before written history began, and by the time our story takes place, they had already developed practical ways of managing everyday life. Much of what historians know today comes from archaeology and surviving medical texts, although not every detail has survived. Ancient Egypt still keeps many of its quiet secrets. One thing is generally accepted: linen was everywhere. Flax grew well along the fertile banks of the Nile, and Egyptian linen became famous throughout the ancient world. Some cloth was coarse enough for everyday work, while the finest linen was so delicate that later travelers described it as almost transparent in the sunlight. For women, linen had another practical purpose. Soft pieces of washed linen could be folded and reused during menstruation. Unlike modern disposable products, these cloths were carefully cleaned, dried beneath the warm Egyptian sun, and stored until they were needed again. Simple, practical, and surprisingly familiar in many parts of the world even today. Our young woman may have quietly stepped into a small room of the house one morning. She opens a woven basket where neatly folded linen cloths are kept. Perhaps her mother prepared them long ago, knowing this day would eventually arrive. Nothing dramatic is said, no great speech. Her mother simply smiles gently and hands her what she needs. Sometimes love appears in the smallest acts of care. The cloth itself was only one part of the routine. Cleanliness mattered deeply to the Egyptians. Many people today imagine the ancient world as dirty and neglected, but Egypt was rather different. Bathing was common whenever water was available. People washed their hands before meals. Clothing was cleaned regularly. Homes were swept each day to keep away dust blowing in from the desert. Priests even shaved much of their body hair before entering temples, reflecting the Egyptian belief that cleanliness carried both practical and spiritual importance. Ordinary women shared that appreciation for keeping themselves clean. During menstruation, regular washing would likely have helped women remain comfortable in Egypt's hot climate. The cool water from the Nile must have felt especially refreshing after long hours beneath the summer sun. Of course, bathing directly in the river required care. The Nile gave life. It also held crocodiles. Most people preferred choosing places that were known to be safe. One should never interrupt a crocodile's afternoon nap. The crocodile would almost certainly win that disagreement. Inside the home, privacy looked different from the way many people imagine today. Most ordinary houses were not large. Families shared rooms. Children played nearby. Grandparents often lived under the same roof. Yet people still understood the importance of personal space. Certain moments required quiet respect. Women helped one another without embarrassment. Older daughters learned from mothers. Younger sisters observed their older siblings. Knowledge passed naturally from one generation to the next. There was no mystery inside the family, only understanding. Ancient Egyptian medicine also showed a surprising interest in women's health. Some of the surviving medical papyri contain recipes made from herbs, oils, honey, milk, dates, and other natural ingredients that physicians believed could ease discomfort or support reproductive health. Not every remedy would meet modern medical standards. Some probably worked. Others almost certainly did not. Historians are careful to separate evidence from guesswork. Still, these texts reveal something important. Egyptians paid attention. They observed the body. They recorded symptoms. They searched for treatments. That curiosity made Egyptian medicine among the most advanced in the ancient world. If our young woman experienced cramps or discomfort, Older relatives may have encouraged her to rest for a while after finishing the most important household tasks. Perhaps her grandmother prepared a warm herbal drink made from local plants. Perhaps her mother quietly finished a few extra chores without saying a word. Families often cared for one another through actions rather than long conversations. Sometimes kindness needs very few words. Contrary to popular myths, there is little evidence that Egyptian women were forced into isolation during their monthly cycles. Unlike certain later cultures, no surviving records suggest that ordinary women were treated as untouchable or completely separated from family life because of menstruation. Most likely, life simply continued. Bread still needed baking. Children still needed feeding. Water still had to be carried. The Nile did not pause because someone was having a difficult week. Neither did village life. That said, every woman was different. Some probably felt energetic. Others may have welcomed an afternoon of quiet weaving instead of carrying heavy jars beneath the blazing sun. Human bodies have never followed identical schedules. As evening approached, our young woman often sat beside her grandmother in the courtyard while the air slowly cooled. The older woman spoke gently about the changes that came with adulthood. She explained that the monthly cycle was not something to fear. It was part of the same rhythm that guided the moon, the river, the growing crops, and the seasons themselves. Nature moved in cycles. So did people. The lesson was simple. Nothing lasts forever. Discomfort passes. Seasons change. The Nile rises. Then it falls again. Life always moves forward. Slowly, our young woman began to understand her own body with greater confidence. What had once seemed mysterious now became familiar. She learned which days required a little more patience. She learned how to prepare fresh linen before it was needed. She learned that asking older women for advice was never a sign of weakness. It was simply part of belonging to a community. Perhaps that was one of ancient Egypt's greatest strengths. Knowledge rarely belonged to just one person. It belonged to families, to mothers, to grandmothers, to generations of women quietly helping one another without expecting recognition from history. Yet menstruation was only one small part of women's health. There were also healers, physicians, experienced midwives, and remarkable medical texts that reveal just how much ancient Egyptians believed the body could be understood through careful observation. Some of their treatments seem surprisingly thoughtful. Others feel wonderfully strange to modern readers. Either way, they remind us that curiosity about health has existed for thousands of years. And so, as another peaceful evening settles over the Nile and oil lamps begin glowing inside the village homes, we quietly step into the fascinating world of ancient Egyptian medicine, where herbs, healing, wisdom, and centuries of experience shaped the lives of women every single day to T. The sun has climbed high above the Nile. Warm light fills the narrow village paths, and the smell of freshly baked bread drifts from nearby homes. Farmers continue their work in the fields while fishermen guide their boats through the gentle current. Children laugh somewhere in the distance, chasing one another beneath the shade of date palms. Life appears wonderfully ordinary, yet inside one quiet mud-brick house, a young woman sits beside her grandmother, gently rubbing her lower back after a long morning of grinding grain. Her grandmother notices immediately. She smiles kindly. Without saying much, she disappears into a small storage room and returns carrying a woven basket filled with dried herbs, clay jars, and tiny linen bags tied with string. Long before modern pharmacies, this was the family medicine cabinet. Ancient Egypt was one of the world's earliest civilizations to study medicine in a surprisingly careful way. While many treatments were connected with religion and spiritual beliefs, Egyptian healers were also skilled observers. They watched, they recorded, they compared symptoms, and they passed their knowledge from one generation to the next. Thousands of years later, archaeologists have discovered remarkable medical papyri filled with treatments for injuries, illnesses, pregnancy, and women's health. Some of these scrolls are more than 3,500 years old. Reading them today feels a little like opening an ancient doctor's notebook. Some ideas seem surprisingly sensible. Others make modern readers smile with curiosity. Still, they remind us that people have always searched for ways to feel better. When someone became ill in ancient Egypt, the first person they turned to was not always an official physician. Very often, it was someone inside the family, a mother, a grandmother, an experienced aunt, or a respected village midwife. These women spent their entire lives caring for others. They knew which herbs soothed an upset stomach, which oils softened dry skin after months beneath the hot Egyptian sun, which plants were believed to ease discomfort during pregnancy or monthly cycles. Much of this knowledge was never written down. It lived inside memory, inside conversations shared while weaving linen or preparing evening meals. Every generation quietly taught the next. If our young woman complained of cramps or tiredness, her grandmother might prepare a warm herbal drink. The exact recipes have not always survived, but ancient texts mention ingredients such as honey, dates, figs, milk, cumin, coriander, fenugreek, and other local plants that were believed to comfort the body. Honey appeared in many Egyptian remedies, not only because it tasted pleasant, but because it naturally helped protect wounds from infection. Modern science has shown that honey really does contain antibacterial properties. Sometimes the ancient Egyptians understood more than we give them credit for. Of course, not every remedy worked. Ancient medicine mixed careful observation with religious belief. One treatment might involve practical herbs. Another might include a spoken prayer asking the gods for protection. To the Egyptians, there was no conflict between the two. Body and spirit belonged together. Healing often involved both. For women, pregnancy and childbirth were among the most important moments of life, so experienced midwives earned enormous respect within their communities. These women had no modern hospitals, no ultrasound machines, no laboratory tests. Instead, they relied upon years of experience, careful observation, and knowledge passed down through countless births. Imagine a small room inside a mud brick home. The air smells faintly of burning incense and fresh linen. Nearby, family members whisper quiet prayers, while an experienced midwife calmly reassures the nervous mother. She has done this many times before. Her confidence brings comfort to everyone in the room. Perhaps nowhere is Egypt's mixture of medicine and faith more beautifully seen than in the goddess Tauret. With the body of a pregnant hippopotamus, the legs of a lion, and the tail of a crocodile, she may appear unusual to modern eyes. Yet Egyptian families loved her. Small statues of Tauret stood inside many homes, especially where women prepared to give birth. She represented protection, safety, and hope. Another beloved goddess, Hathor, was associated with motherhood, joy, beauty, music, and love. Women prayed to her throughout every stage of life, from young adulthood to marriage to childbirth and beyond. These prayers did not replace practical care. They simply offered comfort during uncertain moments. After all, even today, many people combine medical treatment with hope, faith, or quiet reflection. Some traditions remain surprisingly familiar. Ancient Egyptian physicians also paid close attention to women's reproductive health. Several medical papyri describe ways of diagnosing pregnancy. One famous method suggested placing grains of barley and emmer wheat in separate bags and watering them with a woman's urine. According to the ancient text, if one of the grains sprouted, pregnancy was likely. If neither sprouted, pregnancy was considered unlikely. It sounds rather unusual today, yet modern experiments have found that there may actually be a small scientific basis behind this ancient observation, although it was certainly not reliable by modern medical standards. Sometimes history surprises us. The Egyptians were asking thoughtful questions, even if they did not yet have all the answers. Ancient medical texts also mention methods that may have been intended to help couples avoid pregnancy. Some recipes combined natural ingredients into mixtures placed inside the body. Modern historians believe these were among the world's earliest recorded attempts at contraception. Whether they worked consistently is difficult to know. The evidence is incomplete. Still, their existence reminds us that family planning was not a modern invention. People have been thinking carefully about these questions for thousands of years. The body remained a mystery, but the search for understanding never stopped. Fortunately, serious illness did not fill every day. Most of life was wonderfully ordinary. A scraped knee after chasing goats. A sore back after carrying water jars. A headache after standing too long beneath the Egyptian sun. The village healer became part doctor, part teacher, and part reassuring neighbor. Sometimes simply knowing that someone cared was healing in itself. As the afternoon slowly fades into evening, our young woman helps her grandmother return the herbs to their basket. Each plant has its place. Each clay jar holds a different oil or dried leaf. The basket itself represents generations of quiet wisdom. Not royal treasure, not glittering gold, but something equally valuable. Knowledge. Knowledge patiently gathered over centuries beside the Nile. Knowledge that helped mothers care for daughters. Grandmothers comfort granddaughters. Neighbors help neighbors. As the stars begin appearing overhead, the village grows peaceful once again. Oil lamps flicker gently inside the mud brick homes. Outside, the Nile continues its endless journey beneath the moonlight. Our young woman smiles as she applies a few drops of fragrant oil to her hands before bed. Tomorrow will bring another busy day, another sunrise, another opportunity to learn. And perhaps tomorrow, she will begin discovering something ancient Egypt became famous for throughout the ancient world. Not its temples, not its pyramids, but the remarkable beauty rituals that transformed simple oils, flowers, perfumes, mirrors, and linen into timeless symbols of elegance. That is where our quiet journey continues next, as we step inside the fascinating world of ancient Egyptian beauty secrets. The morning sun rises gently over the Nile. Golden light slips through the small windows of a quiet mud brick home, painting soft patterns across the floor. Outside, fishermen are already guiding their boats onto the river. Farmers walk toward the fields with their oxen, and the village slowly begins another peaceful day. Inside the house, however, the morning begins a little differently. Our young Egyptian woman sits before a polished bronze mirror. It is not perfectly smooth. The reflection is slightly blurred around the edges, but it is enough. She smiles softly as she brushes a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Today is a festival day. There will be music, friends, neighbors, perhaps someone she secretly hopes to see. And like people in every century, she wants to look her very best. When many people picture ancient Egypt, they imagine endless deserts, towering pyramids, and golden treasures. What they often forget is that the Egyptians also loved beauty, not because they were vain, but because cleanliness, fragrance, and careful appearance were closely connected with health, respect, happiness, and even spirituality. Looking after oneself was simply part of everyday life. Long before expensive beauty brands and crowded department stores, Egyptian women had already created surprisingly sophisticated routines using the gifts of nature. The first step was often bathing. Living beside the Nile gave many families regular access to water, although it still had to be carried home by hand. Bathing was more than simply washing away dust. It offered relief from the hot climate. It cooled tired muscles after long hours of work, and it left people feeling refreshed for the day ahead. Soap, as we know it today, did not yet exist. Instead, Egyptians cleaned their skin using natural oils mixed with mineral salts or alkaline substances similar to natron. These mixtures helped remove dirt while protecting the skin from becoming too dry beneath the powerful Egyptian sun. Our young woman gently pours a little scented oil into her hands. The fragrance is soft, perhaps lotus, perhaps lily, perhaps a mixture of herbs gathered from nearby gardens. She rubs the oil into her arms and face. Immediately her skin feels smoother. The dry desert air becomes a little easier to bear. Perfumed oils were among ancient Egypt's greatest luxuries. Even ordinary families tried to use fragrant plants whenever possible. Wealthier households imported rare resins and expensive perfumes from distant lands. Small clay jars held precious oils made from lotus flowers, myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, and other aromatic plants. These fragrances served several purposes at once. They smelled wonderful, they softened the skin, and they helped cover the natural scent of hard work beneath the Egyptian sun. Turns out that smelling pleasant has always been a rather good idea. Flowers played an important role in Egyptian beauty. The blue lotus, especially, became one of the civilization's most beloved symbols. Each morning its petals opened with the sunrise. Each evening they gently closed again. To the Egyptians, the lotus represented beauty, renewal, and life itself. During festivals, men and women sometimes wore fresh lotus flowers tucked into their hair or attached to elegant necklaces. The gentle fragrance followed them throughout the day. Nature became part of their appearance. Perhaps the most famous Egyptian beauty tradition is eye makeup. Even thousands of years later, images of dark, elegant eyes remain one of ancient Egypt's most recognizable features. Our young woman opens a tiny cosmetic jar carved from smooth stone. Inside is black coal. Using a slender wooden stick, she carefully applies the dark powder around her eyes. Her movements are slow and practiced. She has watched her mother do this for years. She knows exactly how much to use. Modern visitors often assume this makeup existed only for fashion. Fashion certainly mattered, but kohl also served practical purposes. The dark pigment reduced the bright glare reflected by the blazing Egyptian sun. Some of its ingredients may even have helped reduce certain eye infections by creating an environment less welcoming to harmful bacteria. Beauty and medicine quietly work together. Now that is quite an impressive beauty routine. Women also used red ochre to add gentle color to their lips and cheeks. Ground carefully into fine powder, this natural pigment created a healthy, warm appearance. No plastic lipstick tubes, no complicated beauty palettes, just earth, minerals, and remarkable creativity. Hair received just as much attention. Some women wore their natural hair, carefully washed and braided into elegant styles. Others preferred short hair during the hottest months. Among wealthier Egyptians, finely crafted wigs became especially fashionable. These wigs were made from human hair, wool, or plant fibers and could be decorated with beads, ribbons, gold ornaments, or fragrant cones of scented wax. As the day grew warmer, the wax slowly softened, releasing pleasant perfume throughout the celebration. Imagine attending a festival while your hairstyle gradually fills the air with the scent of flowers. That is certainly one way to make an entrance. Jewelry completed the look. Necklaces made from colorful faience beads sparkled in the sunlight. Bracelets decorated both wrists. Simple rings adorned graceful fingers. Small amulets rested close to the heart, offering both beauty and protection. Not everyone could afford gold. Most villagers wore beads made from clay, shells, glass, or polished stones. Yet even the simplest necklace could become a treasured family heirloom. Perhaps it had belonged to a grandmother. Perhaps it was a wedding gift. Or perhaps someone special had quietly placed it into her hands one unforgettable afternoon. Sometimes the smallest treasures carry the greatest stories. Linen clothing added another touch of elegance. Freshly washed white linen reflected the sunlight beautifully while keeping the body cool. The fabric moved gently with every step. Simple dresses for everyday work. More finely woven garments for festivals and celebrations. The cleaner the linen, the greater the pride. Dust belonged outside. Fresh linen belonged inside. Beauty in ancient Egypt was never entirely separate from character. People admired kindness, good manners, generosity, a warm smile, a hard-working spirit. No amount of perfume could replace a gentle heart. Even ancient love poems praised compassion almost as often as physical appearance. As the afternoon slowly fades into evening, our young woman finishes preparing for the festival. She adjusts her necklace one final time, smooths the folds of her linen dress, applies one last touch of fragrant oil behind her ears. She glances into the bronze mirror again, not searching for perfection, simply hoping to present the best version of herself. Outside, music begins drifting across the village. The gentle sound of harps, the cheerful rhythm of drums. Children laugh as they hurry toward the celebration. Neighbors call greetings across the dusty paths. And somewhere among the growing crowd may be someone whose eyes quietly search for hers. Because beauty was never only about appearance. Sometimes it was the beginning of a conversation, a shared smile, a lingering glance across a festival square. And perhaps, before the evening comes to an end, two young hearts will once again find each other beside the timeless waters of the Nile. That is where our peaceful journey continues next, as we discover how ordinary Egyptian women and men slowly fell in love in one of history's most fascinating civilizations. The festival has begun. As the golden afternoon slowly melts into evening, the village beside the Nile fills with music, laughter, and the warm glow of oil lamps. Harps play gentle melodies beneath woven canopies. Flutes sing softly above the steady beat of hand drums. Children chase one another between mud-brick homes while older villagers smile from the shade, happy to watch another joyful celebration unfold. Our young Egyptian woman walks through the crowd wearing her freshly washed linen dress. The faint scent of lotus oil follows her with every step. Her necklace catches the last rays of the setting sun. She is not here only for the music, though she would never admit that aloud. Somewhere nearby, another young heart may be hoping for exactly the same thing. Love has always enjoyed hiding inside ordinary moments. Many people imagine that romance in the ancient world was cold and strictly arranged by parents. Ancient Egypt tells a gentler story. Family approval certainly mattered, especially among wealthier households, but historians believe that many ordinary Egyptians married people they genuinely cared for. Affection often came before marriage. Friendship often came before affection. Love was allowed to grow slowly, just as crops slowly ripened beneath the Egyptian sun. In a village, opportunities to meet came naturally. There were no cafes, no cinemas, no messages appearing on glowing screens. Instead, daily life quietly brought people together. The path to the river, the village bakery, the market, the temple, the fields, the annual festivals. Everyday life became the meeting place. Imagine a young man walking toward the Nile with an empty clay jar balanced across his shoulder. He has made this journey hundreds of times before. Today, however, someone else has arrived at the river first. She kneels beside the water, carefully filling her family's jars. For a brief moment, sunlight dances across the gentle waves. She looks up. Their eyes meet. Neither speaks. Instead, both suddenly become very interested in studying completely unrelated things. Perhaps a palm tree, perhaps a fishing boat, perhaps one particularly confident duck paddling past as though it owns the entire Nile. The duck remains blissfully unaware that it has just interrupted the beginning of a love story. Some things never change. Even today, people can become surprisingly fascinated by absolutely anything when they suddenly forget how to start a conversation. These quiet moments likely happened countless times throughout Egyptian history. Life was shared. Neighbors worked beside one another. Families lived close together. Friendships had years to grow before romance quietly appeared. That slow beginning often created strong foundations. Young women admired kindness. Young men admired patience. Hard work earned respect. A cheerful personality could become just as attractive as fine clothing or expensive jewelry. Character mattered, perhaps even more than appearance. Ancient Egyptian love poems reveal exactly that. Thousands of years later, those poems still survive. They speak not only of beauty but also of tenderness. Gentle voices, warm smiles, peaceful walks beside the river. One ancient lover compared the woman he admired to the brightest flower blooming in a garden. Another simply wished to spend an afternoon walking beside the one he loved. The emotions feel wonderfully familiar. Apparently, the human heart has changed very little over 3,000 years. Festivals gave young people even more opportunities to spend time together. Work slowed. Families gathered. The village filled with celebration. Musicians played throughout the day while dancers moved gracefully beneath colorful banners. Fresh bread emerged from clay ovens. Dates and figs filled woven baskets. Children laughed. Older relatives shared stories. And somewhere among the crowd, two young people quietly searched for one another. Perhaps they found themselves standing beside the same temple procession. Perhaps they admired the flowers decorating a statue of Hathor. Perhaps they laughed together when an adventurous goat wandered straight into the middle of the celebration, completely convinced it belonged there. Every festival seems to attract at least one unexpected guest. The goat naturally expected everyone else to adjust their plans. Beauty certainly played its part. Young women carefully braided their hair. They applied kohl around their eyes. They wore fresh linen and their favorite necklaces. Young men also took pride in their appearance. They washed carefully, applied scented oils, wore clean linen garments whenever possible. Looking presentable showed respect, not only for oneself, but for everyone attending the celebration. Still, appearance alone was never enough. Parents watched quietly from a distance. They noticed who treated others kindly, who worked honestly, who spoke respectfully. Love may have belonged to two young hearts. Marriage would eventually join two families. As the evening grew cooler, conversations became a little easier. Perhaps our young couple finally found themselves walking together along the edge of the Nile after the music softened. The stars slowly appeared overhead. The river reflected silver moonlight across its peaceful surface. Neither hurried to fill every silence. Sometimes simply walking beside someone is enough. Words become less important. The river speaks instead. A gentle breeze carries the scent of lotus flowers through the air. Somewhere nearby, frogs begin their nightly chorus. The world feels wonderfully calm. Perhaps he gathers a small blue lotus growing near the riverbank. Without saying much, he offers it to her. She smiles, carefully accepts the flower. No expensive gift, no dramatic speech, just one simple blossom carrying a quiet message. I was thinking of you. Some messages never grow old. Days become weeks, weeks become months. The brief glances at the river slowly become longer conversations. The walks home after festivals become familiar. Families begin noticing. Neighbors certainly notice. And the woman who somehow knows every piece of village news before breakfast? She probably noticed first. News traveled astonishingly fast without newspapers. Fortunately, love rarely minds a curious audience. As the seasons quietly pass, two young people who once struggled to exchange a single sentence now find themselves imagining something much greater. A shared future, a home, family, a lifetime beside the Nile. Yet before marriage could begin, ancient Egyptians often expressed their deepest feelings in another beautiful way. Not through grand speeches, not through expensive gifts, but through gentle poetry and tender words written on fragile sheets of papyrus. That is where our peaceful journey continues next, as we discover the beautiful love letters and romantic poetry that have survived across more than 3,000 years of history. The festival is over. The music has grown quiet. The last oil lamps flicker gently outside the village homes as neighbors make their way back through the narrow mud-brick streets. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey lets out one final complaint before settling down for the night. The Nile continues its endless journey beneath a sky filled with bright stars. For our young couple, however, this is not the end of their story. It is only the beginning. Their friendship has become trust. Their quiet smiles have become open conversations. The little blue lotus flower exchanged beside the river has long since faded, but the feelings behind it have only grown stronger. Now comes the next step, marriage. To many people today, an ancient wedding sounds like something filled with enormous temples, golden crowns, and grand ceremonies watched by hundreds of guests. Ancient Egypt was often much simpler. For ordinary families, becoming husband and wife usually meant beginning a shared household. There was no single wedding ceremony followed throughout the country. No official priest standing before every couple. No long procession through flower-covered streets. Instead, marriage began when two people chose to build a life together. Simple, quiet, and deeply meaningful. Of course, before that happened, both families usually spent time talking. Parents wanted to know that their son or daughter would be treated with kindness. They discussed practical matters. Where would the young couple live? What household goods would they need? Who would help build or prepare their new home? Among wealthier families, written marriage agreements sometimes protected property and inheritance. For ordinary villagers, many promises were spoken rather than written. Trust mattered. Reputation mattered even more. One of the remarkable things about ancient Egypt was the position of women within society. Compared with many other ancient civilizations, Egyptian women enjoyed surprising legal rights. A woman could own land. She could inherit property. She could buy and sell goods. She could appear before a court if necessary. She could even end an unhappy marriage. Modern historians are often surprised by just how much independence Egyptian women possessed. History is rarely as simple as we imagine. As the families reached an agreement, preparations quietly began. Neighbors offered help. One family contributed woven baskets. Another brought clay jars for storing grain. A local carpenter built a sturdy wooden stool. Someone else gifted fresh linen. Nothing extravagant. No mountains of expensive presents. Just practical items that would make everyday life a little easier. After all, a good cooking pot is far more useful than a decorative object when dinner needs preparing every evening. The village became wonderfully busy. Children hurried from house to house carrying small bundles. Adults baked bread from sunrise until afternoon. The smell of warm loaves drifted through every street. Fresh vegetables filled woven baskets. Fish arrived from the Nile. Dates, figs, onions, lentils, and beans covered simple wooden tables. Families who could afford it prepared roast duck or goose for the celebration. And of course, there was beer. Egyptian beer was nothing like the modern drinks many people imagine today. Made from barley, it was nutritious, filling, and safer than water that had been standing too long. Adults enjoyed stronger brews during celebrations, while children often drank lighter versions. Beer was simply another part of everyday life. As evening arrived, music filled the village once again. Harps played gentle melodies. Flutes sang softly through the warm air. Hand drums kept a cheerful rhythm. Soon everyone began dancing. Not carefully practiced performances, just neighbors enjoying themselves together. Children copied the adults. Adults pretended not to notice. Everyone laughed anyway. Our young couple smiles as they watch the celebration. For a little while, they step away from the crowd. Together they walk toward the quiet riverbank. The evening breeze feels wonderfully cool after the day's heat. Moonlight shimmers across the Nile. For the first time, they are not imagining a future together. They are standing inside it. Perhaps they say very little. Not every important moment needs many words. Sometimes simply standing beside the person you love is enough. Silence itself becomes comforting. The young husband gently promises to work hard for the family they hope to build. His wife smiles and speaks of the peaceful home she dreams of creating. Neither knows exactly what lies ahead. There will be years of good harvests. Perhaps there will also be seasons when the Nile floods too little or too much. There will be healthy children. There may also be moments of sadness. Life has never promised perfect happiness, only the opportunity to share it together. Ancient Egyptian artwork gives us beautiful glimpses into married life. Unlike many ancient cultures, husbands and wives are often shown standing side by side. Sometimes they hold hands. Sometimes the wife places one arm gently around her husband's shoulder. Sometimes they simply stand close together, looking peacefully toward the future. These are surprisingly affectionate images. They suggest companionship rather than distance, friendship rather than strict formality, love expressed quietly instead of dramatically. Several tomb inscriptions also speak warmly about husbands and wives. One husband described his wife as the lady of my house, praising her kindness and loyalty. Other inscriptions speak of couples who remained devoted throughout their lives. Reading these words today feels strangely comforting. Behind every ancient carving stood two ordinary people who laughed together, worked together, disagreed occasionally, and cared deeply for one another. Marriage, however, was never only about romance. The next morning, life returned to its familiar rhythm. The husband walked toward the fields. The wife prepared bread for the household. Water still needed carrying. Animals still needed feeding. Clothing still needed repairing. Marriage did not remove responsibility. It doubled it. Yet somehow the work felt lighter when shared. If one person became tired, the other quietly helped. If one worried about the coming harvest, the other offered encouragement. Kindness appeared not through grand speeches, but through countless small actions repeated every single day. A fresh loaf of bread waiting after work. A repaired fishing net left by the doorway. A smile across the room after a long afternoon. Love slowly settled into ordinary routines. And perhaps that is where its greatest strength was found. Not in exciting moments, but in peaceful ones. As weeks turned into months, the couple slowly learned each other's habits. She discovered that he always hummed softly while repairing tools. He learned that she quietly sang while kneading bread. She noticed that he could never remember where he left his sandals. He noticed that she always remembered. Some mysteries of married life are truly timeless. The little mud brick house gradually filled with familiar sounds. Morning conversations, shared laughter, neighbors stopping by unexpectedly. The soft scratching of reed pens as household accounts were recorded. The comforting smell of fresh bread baking in clay ovens. Outside, the Nile flowed exactly as it always had. Inside, something even more precious was quietly growing. A home built not from stone, but from patience, trust, friendship, and thousands of small acts of love that no historian could ever fully record. Soon, another chapter of life would begin. The couple would start thinking about children, about hopes for the future, about the blessings of a growing family. Like nearly every society throughout history, the ancient Egyptians placed enormous importance on fertility, healthy births, and the dream of welcoming new life into the home. That is where our peaceful journey continues next, as we explore fertility, family planning, and the ancient beliefs that surrounded one of life's greatest hopes along the timeless banks of the Nile. The little mud brick house has become a home. Several peaceful months have passed since our young couple began their life together. Every morning starts with familiar routines. Bread bakes slowly inside the clay oven. Water jars are carried from the Nile. The husband heads toward the fields while his wife sweeps the cool earthen floor before the day's warmth settles over the village. Life feels wonderfully ordinary. Yet beneath these everyday routines, another quiet hope has begun to grow. Perhaps this year, perhaps next year, a child may join the family. For most ordinary Egyptians, children were one of life's greatest blessings. Not because they brought wealth or status, but because they brought laughter into the home. They carried family traditions into the future. One day they would help work the fields, care for aging parents, and continue the long story of the family beside the Nile. To have children was considered one of life's natural hopes. But like every generation before and after them, ancient couples understood that such hopes could never be guaranteed. Sometimes babies arrived quickly. Sometimes families waited. Sometimes they waited much longer than they wished. Those quiet uncertainties are as old as humanity itself. For this reason, fertility held an important place in Egyptian life, touched medicine, religion, family traditions, and the private hopes carried inside every home. As evening falls, our young wife quietly lights a small oil lamp before the household shrine. The tiny wooden shelf holds a simple carved figure of Hathor. Beside it rests a fresh lotus flower gathered earlier that morning. She lowers her head for a quiet moment. No grand ceremony, no loud prayer, just a few whispered hopes carried into the still evening air. May our home be blessed. May our family grow. May the children we dream of arrive safely. Across Egypt, thousands of women likely offered similar prayers every evening. The goddess Hathor remained one of the most beloved protectors of women and families. She represented motherhood, love, joy, music, beauty, and fertility. Many women believed she watched over every stage of family life, from courtship to childbirth. Another familiar guardian was Taaret. Her unusual appearance still makes modern visitors smile. Part pregnant hippopotamus, part lion, part crocodile. She looked more like a creature from an imaginative story than a comforting goddess. Yet Egyptian families adored her. Small statues of Taaret stood inside countless homes. Women believed she protected mothers, unborn children, and newborn babies from danger. Sometimes the strongest guardians wear the strangest faces. The ancient Egyptians also carried small amulets for protection. Some were carved from faience, others from stone. Many represented the eye of Horus, scarab beetles, or tiny figures connected with fertility and health. These amulets were not magical in the way modern stories often imagine. Rather, they offered reassurance, a physical reminder that the gods were watching over the family. Hope can be a powerful comfort, even when its shape fits inside the palm of your hand. Of course, the Egyptians did not rely only on prayer. Their physicians also recorded surprisingly practical ideas about fertility and family planning. Ancient medical papyri describe several methods that historians believe were intended to prevent pregnancy. Some recipes combined honey, acacia gum, dates, and plant fibers into mixtures placed inside the body before intimacy. Modern science has shown that fermented acacia can produce substances similar to lactic acid, which may have had some contraceptive effect. Whether these methods worked consistently remains uncertain. They were certainly far less reliable than modern contraception. Still, they reveal something fascinating. Ancient Egyptians were actively thinking about family planning more than 3,000 years ago. That surprises many people today. History often proves far more thoughtful than we expect. Other medical texts describe ways physicians attempted to determine whether a woman might become pregnant. Some methods seem almost scientific. Others seem wonderfully imaginative. Historians are careful not to treat every ancient recipe as proven medicine, but each one reflects careful observation and genuine curiosity. The Egyptians wanted answers. They asked questions. They experimented with the knowledge available to them, and sometimes they came surprisingly close to understanding how the human body worked. Inside the home, however, fertility was not discussed only by physicians. It was part of everyday conversation among women. Imagine our young wife sitting beside her mother and grandmother while weaving linen in the cool shade. Their hands move almost automatically across the threads. The conversation drifts gently from one subject to another. Harvests, neighbors, recipes, babies. Advice is shared quietly, not as formal instruction, simply as life experience. The grandmother smiles. "When your time comes," she says softly, "you will know." No long lecture, no complicated explanation, just calm reassurance from someone who has already lived through every stage herself. Perhaps that was one of the greatest strengths of Egyptian family life. Knowledge stayed inside the home. Mothers taught daughters. Grandmothers taught mothers. Each generation gently prepared the next. As the months pass, our young couple becomes even closer. Their affection no longer depends upon shy glances across the river or nervous conversations during festivals. Now it appears in ordinary routines, sharing bread after a long day's work, helping repair a cracked roof, laughing together when a stubborn goat escapes into the vegetable garden for the third time this week. The goat naturally believes every cabbage belongs to it. Marriage has always included unexpected adventures. Ancient Egyptian artwork often reflects this quiet companionship. Husbands and wives stand side by side. Neither appears above the other. They share the same space, the same journey, the same future. Many historians believe this reflects the partnership that ordinary families valued so deeply. Children would eventually strengthen that partnership, but they did not create it. Love came first. Trust followed. Family grew from both. As another peaceful evening settles over the village, our young wife steps outside beneath a sky overflowing with stars. The Nile glows silver beneath the moonlight. A cool breeze carries the scent of lotus flowers through the darkness. She gently rests one hand across her stomach for just a moment. Not because she knows the future, simply because she hopes. Hope has always been one of humanity's oldest companions. Some hopes become reality. Others require patience. Either way, life continues flowing gently forward, just like the river beside her. And before long, one quiet morning will bring joyful news. A new life has begun. Soon experienced midwives will arrive. Protective prayers will be whispered. Family members will gather inside the little mud-brick home. The greatest adventure of all is about to begin. That is where our peaceful journey continues next. As we step inside an ancient Egyptian home to witness pregnancy, childbirth, and the remarkable women who guided mothers through one of life's most extraordinary moments. The seasons have changed once again. The fields beside the Nile are green. The date palms sway gently in the warm breeze, and another peaceful morning begins in the little village. Farmers walk toward the river before the heat of the day arrives. Fishermen untie their boats from the wooden docks. The smell of fresh bread drifts from clay ovens as children chase one another through the dusty streets. Inside one quiet mud-brick home, however, something wonderful has changed. Our young wife wakes a little earlier than usual. She pauses for a moment before beginning her morning chores. Something feels different. The scent of fresh onions, which normally fills the kitchen with comfort, suddenly seems much stronger than yesterday. She smiles quietly to herself. Perhaps, just perhaps, a new life has begun. Long before modern pregnancy tests, women relied upon careful observation. Their own bodies often gave the first clues. A missed monthly cycle, growing tired more easily, changes in appetite, small signs that gradually became impossible to ignore. Experienced mothers noticed these things almost immediately. Grandmothers usually noticed even sooner. There has probably never been a grandmother in history who missed very much. Soon the happy news quietly spreads through the household. Her husband smiles with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The grandparents offer warm embraces. Neighbors congratulate the young couple. No loud announcements, no printed cards. Simply quiet joy shared among people who have known one another for years. For every family beside the Nile, pregnancy was both exciting and uncertain. Many women gave birth safely. Others faced real dangers. Without modern hospitals or medicine, every pregnancy required courage, patience, and hope. Perhaps this uncertainty explains why the Egyptians surrounded pregnancy with such care. Women continued their daily lives for much of their pregnancy. Our young mother still helped prepare bread each morning. She swept the house. She spun linen thread. She visited neighbors. She watered small garden plants growing beside the house. But now the people around her watched a little more carefully. If she reached for something too heavy, someone gently took it instead. If she looked tired, her mother quietly suggested she rest for a while. Kindness often appeared without anyone mentioning it. No one wanted unnecessary risks. The village midwife soon became an important visitor. She was one of the most respected women in the community. She had welcomed dozens of babies into the world, perhaps even hundreds. She carried no modern medical equipment, no white coat, no stethoscope, only experience, calmness, and years of practical knowledge. Sometimes those qualities are just as comforting. The midwife gently examined the expectant mother, asking simple questions. Was she eating well? Was she sleeping comfortably? Did the baby seem active? Most of her knowledge came from observation. She had learned by watching countless mothers over many decades. Ancient Egyptian medical papyri also contain advice about pregnancy. Some recommendations involved herbs and healthy foods. Others included prayers and protective rituals. To the Egyptians, medicine and spirituality worked together. One supported the body, the other comforted the heart. As the months slowly passed, our young mother's body continued changing. Her clothing became a little looser. Walking required a little more care. Her husband quietly began helping with tasks that once seemed effortless. Carrying water, repairing the roof, lifting heavy grain sacks. Marriage revealed its true meaning during moments like these. Not grand romance, simple partnership. Each evening, before the household shrine, the family paused for a few peaceful moments. Fresh flowers rested beside small statues of Hathor and Tauret. Oil lamps flickered softly against the mud brick walls. Quiet prayers filled the room. May Mother remain healthy. May the child arrive safely. May this home be filled with joy. Thousands of Egyptian families likely whispered similar hopes beneath the same evening stars. As the final weeks approached, everyone became quietly prepared. Fresh linen cloths were folded neatly. Water jars were filled. The midwife visited more often. Older women remained nearby. They knew the signs. The baby would arrive when it was ready. Then one peaceful evening, as the sun disappeared beyond the western desert, the first labor pains began. Our young mother breathed slowly. The midwife stayed calm. She had seen this many times before. Family members quietly gathered outside the room. No one wished to disturb the mother, but no one wished to leave either. Birth in ancient Egypt usually happened at home. Some women knelt. Others sat on special birth bricks or low stools that helped support the body during labor. These simple tools appear in Egyptian artwork and archaeological discoveries, reminding us that childbirth was understood through generations of experience. The room remained peaceful. Warm water stood nearby. Fresh linen waited within reach. The midwife offered gentle encouragement. Older female relatives comforted the mother with reassuring words. Hours passed. Outside, the village slowly grew quiet. The stars crossed silently above the Nile. Finally, a baby's first cry filled the little house. Every face relaxed. Every anxious breath turned into laughter. A healthy child had arrived. The father, waiting patiently outside, finally heard the wonderful news. His smile probably stretched from one side of the village to the other. A new family member had entered the world. For a little while, nothing else mattered. The baby was carefully washed. Soft linen wrapped the tiny body. The exhausted mother held her child close for the first time. No treasure in Egypt could have seemed more precious. The midwife smiled with quiet satisfaction. Another life safely welcomed. Another family made complete. Recovery after childbirth was just as important. The mother rested while relatives helped prepare meals, clean the house, and care for daily chores. Neighbors often visited with gifts of bread, dates, vegetables, or kind wishes. The village understood that caring for a new mother meant caring for the future. Soon the family began thinking about names. In ancient Egypt, a name was never chosen carelessly. It carried meaning, hope, identity. Some honored the gods. Others expressed wishes for strength, happiness, or long life. Parents believed a name became part of a person's soul. Choosing it was one of the first great gifts they could offer their child. As the days passed, breastfeeding became part of the mother's daily rhythm. Ancient Egyptian women commonly nursed their babies for several years. The close bond between mother and child filled the quiet house with new routines. Sleepless nights, tiny cries, gentle lullabies, soft smiles exchanged in the middle of the night. Parents in every century understand these moments. Outside, the Nile continued flowing exactly as it always had. The river did not know another child had been born. The fields still needed tending. The fishermen still cast their nets. The sun still rose each morning. Yet inside this modest mud-brick home, everything had changed forever. The couple who once exchanged shy smiles beside the river now looked into the tiny face of someone who carried both their futures. Love had become family, and now another beautiful chapter begins. The child will learn to walk, to speak, to laugh, to chase ducks along the riverbank just as generations before had done. That is where our peaceful journey continues next, as we discover how ancient Egyptian mothers and fathers raised their children with patience, wisdom, and quiet love beside the timeless waters of the Nile. Morning returns to the little house beside the Nile. The first rays of sunlight slip through the small windows, warming the mud-brick walls. Outside, fishermen are already pushing their wooden boats into the calm river. Farmers lead their oxen toward the green fields, while the village slowly awakens with familiar sounds. But inside the house, someone has been awake for quite some time. A tiny baby has decided that sunrise is far too late to begin the day. Our young mother smiles sleepily as she gently lifts her child into her arms. The baby immediately becomes quiet, finding comfort in the familiar heartbeat that has been close since before birth. Some things never change. Across thousands of years, parents have learned that babies usually choose their own schedules. Ancient Egyptian families welcomed children with great joy. A healthy child meant hope. It meant another generation would continue the family. One day, those tiny hands would help gather crops, mend fishing nets, care for younger brothers and sisters, and keep family traditions alive. But for now, those tiny hands seem far more interested in grabbing their mother's necklace. The first years of life belonged almost entirely to the mother. Breastfeeding was common throughout ancient Egypt, often continuing for 2 or even 3 years. Medical texts and artwork suggest that nursing was considered the natural and healthiest way to feed a growing child. It also created an incredibly close bond between mother and baby. Throughout the day, our young mother carries her child wherever she goes. While grinding grain, while sweeping the floor, while preparing bread, the baby rests against her shoulder, quietly watching the busy world unfold. Every ordinary task becomes the child's first lesson. Unlike today, there were no nurseries filled with colorful toys or shelves of parenting books. The home itself became the classroom. Children learned by watching. Long before they understood words, they understood routines. They watched their father repair tools. They watched their mother knead bread. They watched grandparents tell stories beside the evening fire. Every day quietly taught them something new. As the baby grows into a curious toddler, the house suddenly becomes much more exciting. Every basket must be explored. Every clay pot deserves careful investigation. Every sleeping cat looks like the perfect friend. The cat, unfortunately, may not always agree. Ancient Egyptian cats were famous for protecting homes from mice, but they probably spent just as much time patiently avoiding enthusiastic toddlers. Soon the little child takes those first uncertain steps. One hand reaches toward the mother, another toward the father. A few wobbly movements, a tiny stumble, then one proud little smile. The entire family celebrates as though the child has just conquered the greatest kingdom in the world. Perhaps in that moment they have. As children became stronger, they slowly joined the daily rhythm of village life. There was no rush. Parents understood that every child learned at their own pace. A little girl might proudly carry a small basket beside her mother, convinced she was doing most of the work. A little boy might follow his father into the fields, holding a tiny wooden tool that looked far more impressive than it actually was. The adults smiled. Everyone understood that learning begins with pretending. By the age of 5 or 6, responsibilities slowly increased. Not because childhood was ending, but because family life depended on everyone helping in small ways. Girls often learned how to grind grain, weave linen, collect water, and prepare simple meals. Boys helped care for animals, gathered firewood, carried tools, and learned farming or fishing from their fathers. These jobs were not meant to burden children. They were lessons for the future. Each new skill brought confidence. Each small responsibility built independence. Education also took different forms depending on the family's circumstances. Most ordinary children learned everything they needed through daily life. But wealthier families sometimes sent their sons to become scribes. Their boys studied reading, writing, mathematics, and careful record-keeping. Learning hieroglyphs was no easy task. There were hundreds of symbols to remember. Modern students sometimes complain about learning the alphabet. Ancient Egyptian students might have quietly wished for only 26 letters. The famous saying, "The pen is lighter than the plow," encouraged boys to study hard. After all, writing indoors sounded much more comfortable than working beneath the blazing summer sun. Yet most children never became scribes. Their classroom remained the village itself. Grandparents played an especially important role. As evening approached, the family gathered for another simple meal. Fresh bread, fish from the Nile, lentils, onions, dates, perhaps a little beer for the adults. The children listened while grandparents shared stories about past floods, successful harvests, strange dreams, or funny neighbors. History lived through conversation. One story led to another, Sometimes the children interrupted with endless questions. Why do crocodiles have such big mouths? Do the stars ever fall into the Nile? Can ducks understand people? Grandparents smiled patiently. Curious children have existed in every civilization. The bond between brothers and sisters also grew stronger each year. Older children helped care for younger ones. They taught them games, showed them simple chores, protected them from trouble, or at least tried to. Sometimes older brothers accidentally encouraged exactly the kind of adventure parents hope to avoid. Human nature has always been wonderfully familiar. Play remained just as important as work. Archaeologists have discovered wooden dolls, carved animals, leather balls, spinning tops, toy boats, and board games like Senet. Children also invented games that left no trace behind. Running races beside the river, playing hide-and-seek among date palms, pretending reeds were mighty ships sailing across the Nile, laughing until someone slipped into the mud. Fortunately, mud washes away. Good memories usually stay much longer. As childhood slowly gave way to adolescence, parents noticed another quiet change. Their son stood a little taller. Their daughter carried herself with greater confidence. The playful little child who once followed them everywhere now began forming opinions of their own, sometimes very confident opinions. Growing up has always included a few lively family discussions. Still, love remained at the center of Egyptian family life. Parents guided through example more than strict commands. Children learned respect by watching respectful adults. They learned kindness because kindness surrounded them. They learned responsibility because every member of the household quietly carried their share. Inside these modest mud brick homes, surrounded by bread ovens, woven baskets, clay jars, and the endless rhythm of the Nile, generations were shaped not by grand speeches, but by thousands of ordinary moments shared together. Before long, the children who once laughed while chasing ducks would become young men and women themselves. Some would fall in love. Some would marry. Some would begin families of their own. And so the gentle circle of life beside the Nile would continue, just as it had for countless generations before them. Yet while raising children filled the home with joy, it also required an extraordinary amount of work. From sunrise until long after sunset, Egyptian women managed households with remarkable skill, balancing baking, brewing, weaving, trading, caring for children, and countless other responsibilities that kept family life running smoothly. That is where our peaceful journey continues next, as we follow an ordinary Egyptian woman through an entire day of work from sunrise to sunset along the timeless banks of the Nile. The village is still wrapped in darkness. Only the brightest stars remain above the Nile as a cool breeze drifts across the sleeping fields. Most of the village is quiet. Even the ducks seem reluctant to begin another day. But inside one modest mud brick house, a familiar sound breaks the silence. A clay oven is being prepared. Our Egyptian mother is already awake. She quietly rises from her woven reed bed, careful not to wake the youngest child sleeping beside her. She wraps herself in a fresh linen dress, ties back her dark hair, and steps into the cool courtyard. The day has begun. For most women in ancient Egypt, work started long before sunrise. Not because anyone demanded endless labor, simply because a household needed constant care. A home did not run by itself. Bread did not bake on its own. Water jars did not magically refill. Children rarely dressed themselves without becoming wonderfully distracted halfway through. Some things have changed very little over the past 3,000 years. The first task is always bread. Bread was the heart of nearly every Egyptian meal. Without it, breakfast, lunch, and supper would feel incomplete. Our young woman kneels beside a large grinding stone, a basket of grain waits nearby. Slowly, patiently, she begins grinding wheat into flour. Forward, back, forward, back. The heavy stone moves again and again with practiced rhythm. It is hard work. Modern kitchens can prepare flour with the push of a single button. Ancient Egyptian women built strong arms one loaf at a time. Soon a soft cloud of flour fills the air. She mixes the flour with water, adds a little salt, kneads the dough carefully with both hands. Small round loaves begin taking shape. Nearby, the clay oven grows hotter. Before long, the wonderful smell of fresh bread spreads through the little house. It is one of history's most comforting smells. As breakfast is prepared, the rest of the household slowly wakes. Children rub sleepy eyes. The family cat stretches lazily in the doorway, pretending it has been awake all along. The husband prepares for another day in the fields. Simple bread, fresh dates, perhaps onions, maybe leftover fish from yesterday, a cup of beer brewed from barley. Breakfast is not extravagant, but it provides the energy needed for another busy day. Beer surprises many modern people. Ancient Egyptian beer was not simply enjoyed during celebrations. It was part of everyday life. Because it was brewed during fermentation, it was often safer to drink than water that had stood too long in the hot sun. Children usually drank much weaker versions. Adults preferred stronger brews after long hours of work. Once breakfast is finished, another important task begins: collecting water. Our young mother lifts 2 empty clay jars and walks toward the Nile with several other women from the village. This daily journey is more than simple work. It is also a time for conversation. Neighbors greet one another warmly. Someone shares news about a successful harvest. Someone else mentions that a goat escaped again. Apparently, one particular goat has developed ambitious career plans involving everyone's vegetable garden. The women laugh. Village life is built upon these ordinary conversations. Friendships grow while water jars slowly fill. Returning home requires careful balance. Each jar is surprisingly heavy. Years of practice allow Egyptian women to carry them with graceful confidence. Back inside the house, weaving waits. Linen was one of Egypt's greatest treasures. The flax plant grew well beside the Nile, and its fibers became soft, beautiful cloth. Our young woman sits beside a simple loom. Patiently she passes thread over and under. Again and again, hours slip quietly by. A single length of fine linen cannot be rushed. The cloth she creates may become clothing for her family, perhaps blankets, perhaps trade goods exchanged in the village market. Every thread represents careful work. Many women also produced baskets. Using reeds gathered from the Nile, skilled hands twisted and folded each strand into strong containers used throughout the household. Baskets carried vegetables, stored grain, held bread, protected precious belongings. Without baskets, everyday life would become surprisingly difficult. As the morning grows warmer, another familiar visitor arrives. The children. One needs help tying a sandal. Another cannot find the little wooden toy boat they were holding only moments ago. The youngest proudly presents a smooth stone discovered outside. It is apparently the greatest treasure ever found. Every parent learns to admire many interesting rocks. Patiently, our mother listens to every story, answers every question, offers every hug. Raising children happens alongside every other responsibility. Not separately, the family cat quietly follows behind, hoping someone accidentally drops a piece of bread. Cats earned their place in Egyptian homes. They protected grain from mice and rats. They also accepted affection with the calm confidence that cats still possess today. Some personalities truly survive the centuries. Around midday, the heat becomes intense. Much of the village slows. People seek shade wherever they can find it. Inside the thick mud brick walls, the house remains pleasantly cool. Lunch is simple: fresh bread, lentils, vegetables, perhaps cucumbers, figs, dates, fish if the morning catch was successful. Nothing fancy, everything nourishing. After a short rest, the afternoon brings new work. Clothing needs repair. A tear is carefully stitched. A loose seam is strengthened. Nothing useful is thrown away without good reason. Egyptian families understood the value of caring for what they owned. An old basket found new purpose. A cracked pot became storage. Worn linen became cleaning cloths. Waste was rare. Sometimes our young woman visits the village market. Here she may exchange woven linen, baskets, or surplus vegetables for cooking oil, pottery, herbs, or other household necessities. Markets are lively places. Donkeys carry heavy loads. Merchants call out friendly greetings. Children weave between stalls. The smell of spices fills the warm air. Trading is not only business. It is another chance to meet neighbors and share news. Women played an active role in these exchanges. Unlike many ancient societies, Egyptian women could own property, make purchases, and manage their own possessions. This independence gave many wives an important voice within the household. As afternoon slowly fades, more familiar chores return. The courtyard is swept. Fresh water is stored. Vegetables are prepared. Another batch of bread may already be rising. The husband returns from the fields. His clothes carry dust from the day's work. He smiles as children run to greet him. Without saying very much, husband and wife begin working together. He repairs a broken stool. She finishes preparing supper. One child gathers firewood. Another feeds the family goat. Everyone quietly contributes. That is how a household succeeds, not through one person's effort, but through many small acts of cooperation. As darkness settles across the Nile, cooking fires glow inside every home. The evening meal brings the family together once again. Stories fill the room. One child proudly explains how they almost caught a duck. The duck remembers the story rather differently. Grandparents laugh softly. Parents exchange tired smiles. The day's work is finished. Oil lamps cast warm golden light across the mud brick walls. Outside, frogs begin singing beside the river. The stars slowly appear overhead. Our Egyptian mother finally sits down. Her hands are tired. Her feet ache a little. Yet as she looks around the room, at her husband, her children, the fresh bread on the table, and the peaceful home they have built together, she feels something far greater than exhaustion. She feels quiet contentment. Her work has not built temples. It has not raised pyramids. History may never record her name, but without women like her, ancient Egypt could never have flourished. The strength of a civilization begins inside ordinary homes. And tomorrow, as another festival approaches, these hardworking families will set aside their daily chores for music, dancing, laughter, and joyful celebrations beneath the warm Egyptian sun. That is where our peaceful journey continues next, as we discover the festivals, music, and moments of happiness that brought entire villages together along the timeless banks of the Nile. The work can wait until tomorrow. For once, the grinding stones are quiet. The fishing nets remain hanging beside the doorway. The baskets stay where they were left the evening before. Even the oxen seem to sense that today is different. The village wakes with excitement instead of routine. Today is a festival. Long before the famous pyramids became ancient, the people of Egypt filled their calendar with celebrations honoring the gods, the changing seasons, successful harvests, and the life-giving Nile itself. These special days offered something every hard-working family needed from time to time: a chance to pause, a chance to laugh, a chance to enjoy one another's company. Our Egyptian family wakes before sunrise, but not because there is bread to bake for the market or grain to grind before the heat arrives. This morning feels lighter. The children are already whispering excitedly before their parents even open their eyes. When are we leaving? Will there be music? Can we see the boats? Questions arrive faster than breakfast. Parents have always learned that children become especially energetic on days when they are supposed to be patient. The mother smiles as she opens the family's wooden storage chest. Inside lies her finest linen dress. It is carefully folded, protected from dust, and only worn on the most special occasions. She gently shakes the cloth open, smoothing every wrinkle before putting it on. Fresh linen feels cool against her skin. Simple, elegant, beautiful. Her husband also dresses in his cleanest linen kilt. The children proudly wear freshly washed clothing, doing their very best to stay clean for at least the next few minutes. That goal proves optimistic. Before long, someone has already found a patch of dust interesting enough to investigate. Some traditions belong to every century. Preparing for a festival is about more than clothing. Our young woman reaches for a small clay jar filled with scented oil. She gently rubs a little onto her hands and neck. The fragrance comes from lotus flowers, herbs, and fragrant resins gathered from distant lands through Egyptian trade. The oil softens her skin after long days beneath the warm sun. It also leaves behind a pleasant scent that lingers throughout the day. Ancient Egyptians appreciated beauty, but they also appreciated comfort. Sometimes the two went together quite nicely. Next comes makeup. Using a small wooden stick, she carefully applies dark kohl around her eyes. Modern people often think of makeup as something used only for appearance. The Egyptians certainly enjoyed looking their best. But kohl also helped reduce the bright glare of the sun and may have offered some protection against dust and eye infections. Looking elegant while protecting your eyesight? That sounds like a rather clever invention. She fastens a colorful necklace made from blue faience beads around her neck. A pair of simple bracelets completes the outfit. Nothing extravagant, just enough to make the day feel special. Meanwhile, her husband quietly adjusts his own necklace and smooths his linen clothing. Ancient Egyptian men cared about their appearance too. Human nature has never been one-sided. Soon the entire family steps outside. The narrow village paths are alive with smiling neighbors. Everyone seems to be heading in the same direction, toward the temple, toward the river, toward the celebration. Children run ahead in excited little groups. Older villagers walk more slowly, greeting friends they have known for decades. Everywhere there are smiles. One of the greatest festivals honored the beautiful goddess Hathor. She represented love, music, joy, beauty, motherhood, and celebration itself. People believed that honoring the gods was not always meant to be solemn. Sometimes the best way to show gratitude was through happiness. As the family approaches the temple courtyard, the sound of music begins floating through the morning air. First comes the soft melody of a harp, then the cheerful notes of a wooden flute. Soon steady drumbeats join the rhythm. The music is gentle but joyful. It seems to invite everyone to walk just a little lighter. Professional musicians perform while dancers move gracefully through the gathering crowd. Their flowing linen garments catch the warm sunlight as they turn and sway. Children stop walking altogether. Watching feels much more interesting than continuing toward wherever their parents were leading them. Parents patiently wait. Eventually, festivals also bring remarkable sights. Priests carefully carry sacred statues of the gods during temple processions. The figures remain mostly hidden beneath decorated shrines as people quietly bow their heads with respect. Fresh flowers line the pathways. Incense drifts gently through the warm air. For a few peaceful hours, everyday worries seem very far away. Nearby, merchants have set up temporary stalls. The smell of warm bread mixes with roasted duck, fresh figs, dates, honey cakes, onions, herbs, and sweet fruits. Large clay jars hold cool beer brewed from barley. Families gather beneath shaded awnings to share simple meals together. Children seem convinced that festival food somehow tastes better than ordinary food. Perhaps they are right. Food shared during happy moments often does. Our young couple finds a comfortable place beneath the shade of a sycamore tree. Their children happily chase one another through the grass while grandparents quietly watch nearby. For a little while, there is nothing that needs repairing. No grain to grind, no roof to mend, only time. Time spent together. As the afternoon continues, games begin. Children throw small balls made from leather. Others race through open fields beside the river. A group gathers around a board game of Senet. The rules remain partly mysterious even today. Apparently, this has never stopped anyone from confidently explaining how everyone else is playing incorrectly. Board games have always inspired surprisingly strong opinions. Young people also find festivals especially exciting. The village suddenly feels much larger than usual. Friends meet after weeks apart. Shy smiles are exchanged across the crowd. Perhaps one young man finds himself standing beside a certain young woman while watching the musicians. Neither seems quite sure what to say. Fortunately, the music fills the silence beautifully. Many romances probably grew stronger during days just like this. Parents noticed, of course. Parents usually notice everything. They simply pretended not to watch too closely. As evening approaches, hundreds of small oil lamps begin glowing around the temple courtyard. The golden light reflects across the calm waters of the Nile. The music grows softer. The conversations become quieter. Families gather one final time before returning home. Our Egyptian mother looks around at the people surrounding her. Neighbors, friends, relatives, children laughing together, grandparents smiling peacefully. Her husband gently reaches for her hand. No grand speech is needed. After years of marriage, small gestures often say the most. She smiles back. Life beside the Nile is not always easy. There are difficult harvests, illness, floods, long days beneath the hot Egyptian sun. But festivals remind everyone why those hard days are worth enduring. Because happiness grows strongest when it is shared. Slowly, the family begins the peaceful walk home beneath a sky filled with stars. The children are tired now. One falls asleep while being carried on his father's shoulders. Another clutches a small wooden toy purchased from a cheerful merchant earlier that afternoon. The village grows quiet once more. Tomorrow the grinding stones will turn again. The fishing boats will return to the river. Daily life will continue. But tonight hearts feel lighter. And before another sunrise arrives, our journey will step inside an even quieter part of Egyptian life. The small household shrines, protective amulets, whispered prayers, and everyday beliefs that brought comfort to ordinary women and families beside the timeless Nile. That is where our peaceful story continues next. Night falls softly over the Nile. The village is quiet again, as if the day has folded itself gently into sleep. Cooking fires have cooled. Children are tucked into woven mats. Even the cats have found their favorite corners, curling into small shadows inside the mud brick homes. Inside one house, a small oil lamp still burns. Its flame flickers gently against the wall, casting soft golden light across a simple wooden shelf. This is not a temple, not a grand sacred hall filled with priests and rituals. This is something far more personal, a household shrine. In ancient Egypt, religion was not only something practiced in large temples. It lived inside the home. It lived in daily life. For many women, faith was not distant or formal. It was close, familiar, a quiet presence woven into every part of the day. Our Egyptian mother kneels slowly in front of the small shrine. On the shelf sits a carved figure of Hathor. A small amulet of Taret rests nearby. Fresh lotus flowers, now slightly wilted, are still placed carefully in a clay cup. There is also a small bowl of bread and a few drops of water. Nothing extravagant, just simple offerings from an ordinary home. She closes her eyes for a moment, not in fear, not in strict ritual, but in quiet trust. A soft whisper leaves her lips. Protect my children. Protect my home. Keep my family safe through the night. These were the kinds of prayers repeated in thousands of homes along the Nile, not written in grand stone temples, but spoken softly in mud brick houses where life actually happened. Ancient Egyptian women played a central role in household spirituality. They were not just caretakers of children and food. They were caretakers of blessings, protection, and hope. Many small objects found by archaeologists show how deeply belief was woven into daily life. Amulets shaped like the Eye of Horus were especially common. They were believed to offer protection, health, and safety from harm. Some were worn around the neck. Others were placed inside homes or even buried with loved ones. Not because people believed objects had power on their own, but because they represented something deeper: faith, comfort, reassurance in an uncertain world. Life beside the Nile could be generous, but it could also be unpredictable. A good flood meant rich harvests. Poor flood meant hunger. Illness could arrive without warning. Animals could fall sick. Children could become weak. In such a world, hope was not optional. It was essential. That is why even simple charms mattered so much. They gave people something to hold on to when life felt uncertain. Our young mother gently adjusts a small bracelet on her wrist. It is made of blue faience beads. Smooth, cool, familiar. Perhaps it was a gift. Perhaps it was inherited from her own mother. Either way, it carries meaning far beyond its material. To her, it is not just decoration. It is protection. It is memory. It is connection. Outside, the wind moves softly through the palm trees. The Nile flows silently in the distance. Inside the house, life feels calm again. Children sleep peacefully. The husband rests after a long day of work. Even the smallest sounds feel distant now. Only the gentle crackle of the oil lamp remains. Many Egyptian homes likely had moments just like this. Pause between days. A quiet space where thoughts settled, where worries softened, where hope quietly returned. Some women may have also practiced simple healing rituals within the home. Ancient medical texts show that healing and spirituality often work together. A herbal mixture might be prepared. A prayer might be spoken alongside it. A protective charm might be placed nearby. Medicine and belief were not separate worlds. They were part of the same understanding of life. Not everything is recorded clearly in history, but the patterns are easy to feel. Care, protection, tension, love. These shaped daily life far more than grand events ever did. As the night deepens, our Egyptian mother slowly rises from the shrine. She blows gently on the oil lamp. The flame shrinks, then disappears. Darkness settles softly into the room, but it is not a heavy darkness. It is peaceful, comforting, familiar. She walks quietly across the room and lies down beside her sleeping family. The sound of breathing fills the space. Slow, steady, alive. Outside, the Nile continues its endless journey, unchanged, unbothered, as it has always been. And in thousands of homes just like this one, other women are doing the same. Lighting lamps, whispering prayers, placing amulets, hoping for protection, for health, for tomorrow, for life itself to continue safely one more day. And so, the invisible world of ancient Egypt reveals itself not only in temples and monuments, but in the quiet hands of women who kept their families safe through belief, care, and everyday rituals that connected the human world to something greater. That is where our peaceful journey continues next, as we step into the later years of life beside the Nile, and discover how Egyptian women grew older with wisdom, respect, and quiet dignity. The Nile moves slowly tonight, not in a way anyone can see with the eyes, but in a way the heart understands. The same river that carried boats, laughter, and harvests for countless years now reflects a quieter world beneath the stars. Inside a modest mud-brick home, the light is softer than it once was. An older woman sits near the doorway. Her hands rest gently on her lap, the same hands that once ground grain before sunrise, the same hands that carried water jars, held newborn children, repaired clothes, and prepared countless meals for a growing family. Now they move a little slower, but they are no less important. Time in ancient Egypt did not rush forward the way it feels in modern life. It flowed, like the Nile itself, one season blending into the next, one life gently unfolding into another. Our Egyptian woman is no longer young, but she is far from forgotten. In fact, she is more respected now than ever. Age in ancient Egypt often brought dignity. A grandmother was not seen as someone who had stepped away from life. She was seen as someone who had completed many of its most important journeys. Inside the house, children gather close around her. Not just her own grandchildren, but often the children of neighbors as well. Stories have always been one of the greatest treasures an elder can offer. She begins to speak softly. Her voice carries the weight of experience, but also warmth. She tells them about floods that came too high one year, and harvests that were so abundant the whole village celebrated for days. She tells them about neighbors who helped in difficult times, and moments when kindness appeared unexpectedly, like rain in the desert. The children listen carefully, at least for the first few minutes. Then someone notices a beetle on the floor and the attention briefly shifts, as it always does. The grandmother smiles. Even that is familiar. Some things never change. As she speaks, she sometimes pauses to adjust her shawl or rest her hands. Her body carries the memory of decades of work, of carrying children, of long days in the sun, of countless small responsibilities that never appeared in official records, but built the foundation of daily life. In ancient Egypt, older women often remained deeply involved in family life. They helped raise grandchildren. They advised younger women. They prepared meals when needed. They shared knowledge about herbs, healing, and household care. Their experience was not something set aside. It was something relied upon. Outside, the village continues its rhythm. Younger women still walk to the river with water jars. Men still return from fields at sunset. Children still chase each other through dusty paths. But inside this home, something quieter is happening. The passing of knowledge, not written in books, not carved into stone, but spoken, remembered, passed from one generation to the next. Our grandmother gently reaches into a small wooden box. Inside are a few personal items. A simple bracelet made of blue beads, a worn linen cloth, perhaps a small amulet that has been kept for many years. Each object carries memory, energy of life, not of wealth, but of life itself. Moments lived, days survived, laughter shared, loss endured. She places the bracelet into the hands of a young girl sitting beside her. The girl turns it carefully, studying it with curiosity. It looks simple, but to the grandmother it holds an entire lifetime. In ancient Egypt, inheritance was not only about land or possessions. It was also about identity, about continuity, about the feeling that life does not end with one generation, continues through the next. As evening approaches, the house fills with familiar smells. Bread baking in a clay oven, a small pot of lentils simmering, dates placed in a bowl for sweetness. The family gathers once more. The grandmother sits slightly apart, but not alone. She is surrounded. Her presence anchors the room in a quiet way, like an old tree that has seen many seasons but still offers shade. After dinner, she watches the younger generation carefully. She sees herself in them, in their energy, their impatience, their laughter, their small arguments over nothing important. Life repeats itself, not exactly the same, but always familiar. Later, when the house grows quiet, she steps outside for a moment. The air is cool. The Nile reflects a silver path across the darkness. She looks at it for a long time, perhaps remembering, perhaps simply resting in the present. She does not fear the passing of time. In her world, time is not an enemy. It is a companion, one that has walked beside her since childhood. Inside, the children are already asleep. The adults are settling for the night. Tomorrow will bring another cycle of work, meals, and small responsibilities. But for now, everything is still, peaceful, balanced, and deeply alive. Our Egyptian woman returns inside and lies down beside her family, not as someone who has left life behind, but as someone who has carried it forward, through love, through labor, through years of quiet strength that history rarely writes down, but civilization could never exist without. And as sleep slowly settles over the household, we move gently toward the final chapter of our journey along the Nile, where evening returns once more, and a lifetime of ordinary moments becomes something quietly unforgettable. Evening arrives slowly along the Nile, like it does not want to interrupt the day too quickly. The light changes first, not in a sudden way, but in soft stages. The harsh gold of midday fades into a warmer glow, then into a gentle amber that rests on everything it touches. Mud brick walls turn soft orange. The river begins to look darker, heavier, like it is holding onto the last light before letting it go. Somewhere in the distance, birds call out as they return to their resting places, their wings cutting across the sky in calm, familiar patterns. In a small village near the riverbank, life is not stopping yet, but it is slowing down. People move with less urgency now, like the day has already done most of its work and only quiet tasks remain. A woman kneels near a low clay oven, carefully checking the bread she placed inside earlier. The smell is warm and comforting, filling the air with something simple but deeply satisfying. Nearby, a child sits on the ground, playing with small stones, arranging them into shapes that probably mean more to them than anyone else understands. A man washes his hands in a clay basin outside the house, the water catching the last light before it disappears into shadow. Inside one of the mud brick homes, the day feels even softer. The walls hold the warmth of sunlight that is now fading. A grandmother sits on a woven mat, slowly spinning thread between her fingers. Her movements are steady, almost automatic, like she has done this for so many years that her hands remember even when her mind rests. Across from her, a young girl watches quietly, her eyes following each motion, learning without needing instructions. Sometimes the grandmother speaks, not loudly, just enough for the words to float gently through the room. Stories about ancestors, about river floods from long ago, about times when the harvest was strong or weak. These stories are not just entertainment. They are memory, passed down like fabric woven thread by thread. Near the doorway, a teenage boy leans against the wall, half listening, half lost in thought. His mind drifts between tomorrow's tasks and the warmth of the present moment. Outside, his younger siblings chase each other in the fading light, their laughter echoing through the narrow village path. No one tells them to be quiet right away. Evening has its own tolerance for noise, as if even the day enjoys a little bit of playful chaos before fully ending. A little farther away, near the river, a woman stands for a moment alone. She looks at the Nile as it moves steadily forward, carrying reflections of the sky. There is something calming about it, something that makes thoughts slow down. She adjusts the edge of her linen dress and breathes in the cooler air. The river has always been here. It was here when she was a child. It is here now, and she knows it will be here long after today becomes memory. There is comfort in that kind of constancy. She turns away eventually, not because she is finished looking, but because life continues calling her back into the village. Back inside the homes, oil lamps begin to glow. Small clay lamps, filled with oil and a simple wick, flicker into life one by one. The light they produce is not strong, but it is enough. Enough to see faces, enough to see hands working, enough to make the shadows dance gently along the walls. There is something almost intimate about this light, like it turns every room into a small circle of safety in the middle of the night. Dinner is simple. Bread, maybe some vegetables, perhaps a little beer shared among adults. People sit together, not in silence, but in soft conversation. They talk about small things, the heat of the day, the condition of the fields, someone's small mistake at work that became a joke by evening. Laughter appears easily here, not loud or forced, but natural, like it belongs in the rhythm of the night. Even worries are spoken gently, as if speaking too harshly might disturb the peace the evening is trying to build. Children grow quieter as the night deepens. One by one, They begin to lean against their mothers or lie down on woven mats. A mother brushes dust from her child's hair with slow, careful hands. Another hums a tune that has no clear beginning or end, just a soft melody passed down through time. Sleep does not arrive suddenly. It comes slowly, like the river at dusk, easing everything into stillness. Outside, the air becomes cooler. The sky changes again, this time into deep blue, then darker still. Stars begin to appear, scattered at first, then more confident, until the entire sky feels filled with quiet light. The Nile reflects them faintly, as if holding onto their image while also letting them go. It is a strange and beautiful balance, like everything in this world, holding and releasing at the same time. An older woman sits outside her home for a moment before going inside. She has seen many evenings like this one, so many that they blur together when she tries to count them. Yet each one still feels slightly different, like no two sunsets are ever truly the same. She thinks briefly about her younger years, about raising children, about work, about laughter that once felt louder than it does now. Her hands rest quietly in her lap. There is no sadness in her expression, only a calm acceptance. Life has been full in its own ordinary way. Inside, her family prepares for sleep. Mats are laid out, lamps are dimmed, doors are closed but not locked in any harsh sense. There is trust here, trust in neighbors, trust in the rhythm of village life, trust that the night will pass as it always does. Someone whispers a final comment that makes another person smile. Then silence begins to take over, not suddenly, but gently, like a blanket being placed over the world. As the village settles, the sounds outside become fewer. The river continues its steady movement, indifferent yet peaceful. It does not rush, it does not pause. Simply flows as it always has. That movement becomes almost like a lullaby in itself, a sound that belongs to the land more than any human voice. And in that quiet, there is something deeply ordinary, yet deeply beautiful. No grand events, no dramatic endings, just people living, eating, working, laughing, aging, and resting beneath a sky that has seen it all before. Thousands of years may stand between that world and any future listener, but the feeling remains familiar. A home at dusk, a family settling in, a river continuing its journey. Finally, the last lamps are extinguished. One by one, the village disappears into darkness, not in fear, but in peace. The Nile reflects the night sky completely now, as if the earth and heavens have agreed, just for a moment, to share the same quiet. And as everything grows still, there is a final sense that nothing is truly ending, only resting, waiting for another morning, another cycle, another quiet beginning along the endless river.